the first time in West Australian history, TVW Channel 7 News has captured live the full power of one of nature's most awesome forces, the cyclone. Today at 10 a.m, Cyclone Dean smashed into Port Hedland at 200 kilometres an hour, then began to relentlessly pummel and shake at every building in the town. Listen now to the horrific sound and the sights as the furious wind roared in from the Indian Ocean to wrench and gnaw at the town and the 12,000 people who live there. This remarkable and exclusive coverage of the cyclone was videotaped by a Channel 7 News crew headed by reporter John Collis, and as you'll see later in this bulletin, the news team risked life and limb to bring you this coverage. It's still very windy in Port Hedland tonight, but Dean has run his rampant course across the coastline and is now marauding the station country and the inland mining towns. John Collis is now able to speak to us direct from Hedland, so let's take you to John Collis live. Well, we're having a little bit of trouble with audio. The wind evidently is still very strong, but I'd just like to repeat the current position for you. 2 Taiwanese seamen are missing, believed drowned, and at the Woodstock station, which is east of Port Hedland, 8 people, 4 adults and 4 children, are stranded amid the rising floodwaters. Goldsworthy is thought to have received heavy damage, and the Aboriginal tent settlement at the Strelly station may also have received the brunt of the big blow. We'll be having a live report from John Collis in our main cyclone coverage in the bulletin in just a few minutes. In other headlines tonight, all the swimming pools in the southeastern parts of the state and the goldfields have been ordered closed by the Minister for Health following a second case of amoebic meningitis. Also tonight we have another satellite coverage of the Prime Minister's American visit, and we'll return to John Collis for his exclusive coverage live from Port Hedland after this break. And we repeat that 2 Taiwanese fishermen are missing, believed drowned, after their boat was caught in the cyclonic winds off the northwest coast. On the mainland, Port Hedland is licking its wounds tonight with at least 40 buildings either damaged or destroyed. At the Woodstock station, 8 people are endangered as floodwaters there continue to rise, and Aborigines who have been living in tents at the Strelly station since Cyclone Amy wiped out their buildings recently may have again suffered at the hands of this cyclone, and Goldsworthy too has again been buffeted. That's a summary, but for us down here in Perth, we escaped. The people up there weren't so lucky, as John Collis found out. John?
Surrounded by all this devastation, it's hard to imagine how you even survived.
Oh, we're fairly fortunate. We've got the cyclone shelter there, which they established with these houses because they realised that the houses up here are really not up to putting up with this sort of thing. Yeah.
What was running through your mind?
Oh, we were more concerned about the kids. We were okay. Locked up in there, we realised that we're going to lose a lot of property, which we did do. But prime consideration was the wife and kids, and they were a bit frightened for a while because the roof come off the building and hit the cyclone shelter, and it was quite noisy at the time and they were a bit nervous. But so long as they were okay, we didn't really care so much what happened to the house.
Have you ever been through something like this before?
Yeah, this is about my 4th or 5th one.
It's broken.
You've only just arrived in Port Hedland, haven't you?
Yes, we've been here 3 weeks.
And how did you cope with the cyclone?
Oh, it was a bit scary. Wasn't really very keen on it, still.
Was your house damaged?
Yes, the roof came off.
Were you in it at the time?
Yes.
What happened?
Oh, well, there was just a really loud cracking noise, and we could see through the ceiling that the roof had gone, and whilst we were dithering around wondering what to do next, the bloke next door who'd seen it go rang us up, and so we hopped over the back fence and ferried the kids across, and we spent the rest of the time there.
What about the children? How did they handle it?
Very, very well. They really weren't bothered at all. They really coped very well. I was the most scared one, I think.
What do you think about this?
Well, we're very relieved that we've managed to come through it without any injury, but now when it's all apart, you look at the place and you think, well, we've got to clean this up now. And that's the worst part, having to clean it up. Everything inside is wet. clothes are wet, furniture's ruined, and well, one starts again. And as I say, we've only been here 3 weeks, so.
What would your personal losses amount to? Have you had a chance to sort of calculate that?
Not really. I don't think our personal losses amounted to not very great. We managed to get most of our valuables out when the roof did go, but we're in a company house, and to the company, their losses would be quite high, and well, our losses will be reasonable, I say.
Where are you going to spend tonight?
We have another house down the road where friends of ours are on leave, and that's where we'll be spending the night tonight.
Where did you ride out the storm?
And the house, 2 houses from here.
Suffer any damage?
No, unfortunately, we were quite lucky.
You were lucky, weren't you? The roofs must have been going off all around you.
Yes, the roof next door to this place went off, and those people came in. The people in this house were already inside a shelter, and they came in after. So at the moment, we've got 2 families in our house.
They'll be staying there, will they?
Well, they're welcome to stay there. Probably some of them might move off tonight.
How was the atmosphere inside that house when the winds started reaching their pitch?
Got quite frightening there for a while, especially with the glass bending in and moving about. We tried to play cards and look at each other for a while, but the whole experience is quite frightening. Yeah.
What sorts of things did you do? I mean, you played cards. Were you able to talk, converse with one another?
For a while, yes. But then the conversation just got out of the way. But you had the kids all dressed up with shoes and coats and everything ready, a suitcase packed all ready to move on, and just waited till it struck us, I suppose. And we were quite fortunate. We didn't have to move.
Where would you have gone to?
It's a good question. As the 2 neighbours had already moved into our house, I think there wouldn't be many places for us to go.
You must have had a grandstand view of some of the action that was going on over the road over here. What was it like?
Yeah, it was pretty horrific, actually. We've been up here about 9 years, and I think it's probably the first time we've actually seen anything in the daylight. And it really all happens at once.
Some of the victims of the cyclone, but now let's take you live to Port Hedland and to John Collis for this up-to-the-minute report. John?
Well, as you might have guessed, things are not quite normal here yet. At the moment, we're flying by the seat of our pants. But what do you say after 12 of the most terrifying hours that we've certainly ever put in, and I'm sure that goes for the people of Port Hedland. The red alert has been lifted here now, and the people are beginning to move cautiously about the town, surveying the damage left by this incredibly destructive storm. Preliminary estimates are that something like 40 homes have been either de-roofed or suffered major structural damage. We'll have more in a moment.
Well, today's cyclone is one of the few in recent years to have crossed the coast in broad daylight. Amazingly, the freak winds normally attack the northern towns in the dark of night. Cyclone Dean struck with great swiftness, surprising even the veteran northwest cyclone watchers. It howled into Hedland and the surrounding areas at daylight and was at its zenith at 10 a.m. And watch now as this house shakes under the force of the 200-kilometre-an-hour winds. Eventually, the occupants will make a hasty retreat into the open and scamper for safety into their vehicle.
They're probably huddled in some protected corner of the house, if there is one. One can only speculate as to the horrors that are going through their minds in there. We're powerless to help them, of course. If we were to get out of this car now, we'd be putting our lives in even greater danger. Obviously, the people have decided that the risk of entering into this storm, rather than staying in the house, is better. They've taken that choice. They're inside their vehicle, and now they'll be heading off, presumably to more safer quarters.
Telecom was just one of the victims as Cyclone Dean spiralled its way through the town. Debris was left in piles outside shops, and chunks of metal flew dangerously head-high along the flooded streets. Despite the terrifying experience of sheltering in collapsing buildings, people obeyed orders and stayed put. Had they ventured onto the streets, injury, possibly death, would have been certain. There's yet no estimate of the damage, but last month's Cyclone Amy made a multi-million-dollar foray across the Pilbara, and these are typical of the scenes in Port Hedland tonight. Little is untouched and almost nothing is unscathed. Reporter John Collis, photographer Michael Goodall and technician Norman Bruce videotaped these scenes from the safety of their vehicle. Whether it was the corner delicatessen or the local service station, there was damage to be seen everywhere. Awnings and carports collapsed and dumped their debris on top of the vehicles underneath. The sea was a sight to be seen. Huge waves, many pleasure craft carried under the rocks and left them high and dry. Power lines and poles were flung to the ground, and communications north of Hedland were knocked out. Trees bent almost parallel to the ground under the pressure of an extraordinary wind. This was typical of many homes. The roof was sheared off. Winds of 200 kilometres an hour. This gives you some idea of the force of the winds that we've never experienced in Perth. Collis made a valiant bid to deliver an inter-camera report at the height of the cyclone. This will give you some idea of the force of that wind. John Collis had to cling desperately to the steel light standard as Dean tried to pry him loose.
We'll have to retreat to our motel room. We'll have to retreat to our motel room now. And just pray that you get to see this vision tonight.
So just repeating the major facts, the Strelly Station Aborigines are stranded. 8 people are stranded at the Woodstock Station, and the position tonight is critical. Goldsworthy is thought to have been mauled yet again, but we hope to have more information on that for you later on tonight. The State Emergency Services are preparing to fly up at first light. Also, they'll be taking bedding, and hopefully power supplies and other equipment will be reinstalled sometime tomorrow. The Deputy Premier, Sir Desmond O'Neill, is also waiting to fly to the scene. Thanks, John. That cyclone coverage was brought to you tonight by reporter John Collis, by cameraman Mike Goodall, and by technician Norm Bruce. And also, we do apologise for some of the breakup in the picture and also a few problems we had with the sound. But we thank Telecom for their cooperation. As you can imagine, it was very difficult to get pictures and sound out of Port Hedland today. As a final footnote to that story, tonight's story was accomplished exactly the same way as was the story we did on similar circumstances on Cyclone Amy last month. Again, we did it exclusively, and of course tonight we did it without the help of the Premier. We'll be back after this break.
2 degrees.